In this video, we're going to show you how to place a valve cover on your Nissan Rogue located on the top side of your engine. Using a 10mm wrench, go ahead and loosen your ground terminal on your battery, pull it off and set that aside. Using a pair of pliers, I'm going to go to this hose on the back side of this box, slide that back. Using a 10mm socket, loosen and remove this bolt. On the back side here, we have a 10mm clamp on this hose. Go ahead and loosen that. Go ahead and grab this air box. We're going to gently pull this up and out. With the back pulled out, we can now go ahead and pull out this hose here. The base right here of this hose, loosen that clamp, slide it up. Pull that up and off. On the main harness here, there are some retainer straps. We're going to use our needle nose pliers and just pinch the little clips on the back side and wiggle these out. Use your trim tool. I'm going to try and pop this retainer out here. On the top side right here, we're going to disconnect this connector. I'm going to press down on that little spring clip, wiggle that off, and go ahead and disconnect our ignition coils here. What I'm doing is I'm pressing down on the back side of the little clip, and I'm just using my little pocket screwdriver to just gently pry the connector off. I'm going to remove this tie wrap right here. Using a 10mm socket, I want to go ahead and loosen and remove these two bolts. This connector right here is held in place with the little plastic spring clip. Just pop that out. I'm going to go ahead and use a jack underneath the vehicle with a block of wood. I'm going to locate the oil pan, which is just on the left side of the engine, and I'm going to put the block on the corner edge of the pan. It's the strongest part. And I'm not going to lift the vehicle. I'm just going to put some support there to hold that engine in place. And that's all we're doing with the jack, is to support that engine. Using an 18mm socket, we're going to loosen this bolt here on the upper engine mount. Now, the reason why we have the engine supported underneath is that once this pulls out, we want to make sure that we don't have any abnormal tension on this here. Slide that bolt out. On this bracket here, there's going to be 5 bolts. These are going to come out with our 16mm socket. You can see that the motor dropped down a little bit, but we have our jack underneath supporting it. We're going to remove all 5 bolts. Short bolt, short bolt, short bolt. These 2 are just a little bit longer. Now on this mount here, there are 3 16mm bolts. There's 2 on the front here, 1 in the back. Let's loosen and remove those bolts. These are all the same size. Remove this 10mm bolt here, securing our AC line in place. That'll allow these lines to be a little more flexible. On the left right here, there's a little plastic retainer. Pop that off. That's going to give us some flexibility here. Our small AC line comes down on the inside of the frame rail right here. It has a plastic retainer. I'm just going to use my screwdriver to kind of open that up and then pull that line up and through. Use an 18mm socket to loosen and remove this bolt here. Remove that and then remove the mount. Go ahead and manipulate that mount and bracket up and out of the way. Using your 10mm socket, we want to go ahead and loosen the bolt securing this bracket here to this bracket below it. Using our 14mm socket, we want to go ahead and just break these bolts free. Use your 10mm socket. We're going to remove the 4 bolts holding our ignition coils. Go ahead and grab the ignition coils. We're going to work those up and out. Set those aside. Now on the back side right here, there's a vacuum hose with a clamp. You're going to use your pliers. Bring that up. And then loosen and remove that hose from the valve cover. And go ahead and remove our oil fill cap. Just plug that so nothing falls down inside the engine. On the intake tube right here, I'm going to go ahead and plug that hole as well. Now, if you have debris on the top side of your engine, as we do, you want to go ahead and clean that, because once we remove this valve cover, we don't want anything falling down inside the engine area. So let's go ahead. We're going to use compressed air to clean that off. Now there's a back bolt in the back here for this bracket, 14mm. We're going to use our bent wrench here. You could use an open end or whatever you have that'll fit in there. Now with that broken free, try and spin that out. With that bolt fully loose, let's go ahead and unthread the rest of these here. I'm going to go ahead and pull these bolts out. These are different sizes. The super long one goes on the front corner here on the front passenger side. This one on the back I cannot remove because it hits the air intake. I'm going to try and pull up on this bracket. Work this up and around that wiring harness. Pull that back bolt out. Now there's a series of 10mm bolts around the perimeter of the valve cover. Let's go ahead and loosen those. Now underneath this bracket right here, there's another 10mm bolt right here. I'm simply going to use my gear wrench to get underneath it. Pop that little grommet out there. Pull our bolt up through that. Our last 10mm bolt is right underneath the coolant tube here to our throttle body. This is it. We can't get access to it. Next step is we're going to use our number 5 Allen wrench, and we're going to loosen and remove the 4 bolts holding our throttle body to the intake, and we're just going to slide it back. The intake tube here is not pliable. It's super rigid. So otherwise we would normally undo the hose clamp, pop that off, and then move the throttle body. In this case here, we're going to unbolt the throttle body, slide it off to the side, just enough we can get access to this bolt. Now just below this one here that we're taking out, there was the 4th and last bolt we want to get to. So you're going to reach around the back side and just put your Allen key around there and get that one loose. So what I'm doing on the back side is using the length of this here to get into it. And then just put my wrench on this and use this leverage to go ahead and loosen that. And once it gets loose, you can just spin this out. Now this is what we're going to do. Make sure that your bolts are all free. I'm not going to remove the bolts because all we're going to do is slide that throttle body off to the side a little bit, just enough to get access to that bolt. And there we have it right there. We want to use our mallet here to go ahead and tap the valve cover just to break that free. Use our small pry bar here to gently pry. At this point here, we're just breaking free our rubber seals on our spark plug tubes. Carefully work that up. We have our gasket here that's sticking to the cylinder head, so pop that off. I want to go ahead and use a rag and some solvent. I want to clean the surface of the gasket face here on our cylinder head. I want to make sure that it is clean and oil free. I'm going to do this all the way around the perimeter, making sure that it is clean. Now each one of these corners here, we're going to have to put a little dab of RTV sealant on this here, just on the corner. So it's going to have 4 corners we need to especially focus on. Make sure there's no residual RTV from the prior gasket. I want to go ahead and you can use some sandpaper and we're just going to gently clean that surface there. I want to make sure that that is nice and clean and there's no RTV left over. You can use some solvent. Apply a small dab of RTV into these corners like so. And do that for each one of those. Just a small amount. Now, things you want to pay attention to on your valve cover. You want to go ahead and make sure that all of these spark plug tubes have seals already in them. If not, you're going to have to get some seals, put them into the new cover. Also check for the gasket. Make sure the gasket is installed as well. I want to go ahead and make sure that this is in place. Pressed in all the way around. Once that's in, ready for installation. Now lift up on the harness and we're going to carefully feed this into place. You want to make sure when feeding this in that you don't knock that gasket off the bottom. Bring this over. Lower that down on top of these spark plug tubes and gently push down. And what I'm doing is reaching down inside the spark plug tubes and just pushing that seal around. Let's now go ahead and install our bolts around the perimeter of the valve cover. Now when tightening the bolts on the new valve cover, I'm going to go ahead and start in the center on the top, come down, and then come over, back up, over, and you're going to continue to work your way out and around. And then you're going to do your 2 end ones. Now let's go ahead and install all 12 of our bolts onto the valve cover. We're going to start all these by hand, and then we'll snug them down. I'm going to go ahead and just block this hole here, prevent anything from falling down inside the engine. Once you feel these bolts bottom out, you're just going to give them a little bit more. Now all of these bolts are shouldered bolt, so you can only tighten them down so far. So when you're snugging these down, the threads are being bottomed out inside the valve cover. You'll pull our towel out, install our oil fill cap. Let's go ahead and install our throttle body. I'm going to bring that gasket up. Feed our bolt through that. Just going to get that started. I'm going to come around to the back side. Once we have the two upper bolts installed, we know that our gasket is lined up. Go ahead and use our Allen wrench. Get that lower bolt started. And go down underneath and get that last fourth one threaded in. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and snug down the Allens here. Now that we tighten out all four of our bolts onto our throttle body, let's go ahead and install our 4 ignition coils. Let's get lower down our ignition coils and press those down onto the spark plug. Now if you were to replace the spark plugs, now would be a perfect time to do it. Install your 4 bolts for your coils. And snug them down. On the back side here, we're going to install this vacuum hose. Good, push that down, and then use your pliers and move that hose clamp down into position. Install a rubber grommet. Let's go ahead and install our bracket here. Remove our oil fill cap briefly. Drop those down. Line up this back bolt area and get this back one started. So once you get that back bolt in, go ahead and install the oil fill cap once again. Let's go ahead and proceed to getting the other bolts lined up and get those started as well. We have our last bolt here. The long one goes on the front passenger side. Let's go ahead and tighten these down. You want to make sure these are good and tight. Once we tighten that one down, put the oil fill cap back on, and we're just going to go around one more time, double checking all the others. Install the bolts here for your ground straps. Before we tighten those there, lock in the harness. Snug down the ground bolts. Install the coil connectors. Reconnect the little clip right here. Go ahead and install your bracket on the outside here. Get the bolt started, and then we'll tighten those down. Use our jack, raise up the engine. We're going to install the 3 bolts holding the main mount. You can use the jack to manipulate the engine into a position where everything is easy to thread in. Once we have all of those installed, take the other mount, work that in a position. Let's go ahead and tighten down the 5 upper bolts. At this point here, we can go ahead and lower the jack. And this is going to allow us to tighten down the bolts here under the engine's weight on the mount. Now this mount here, you'll know that it's on correctly because the thicker part of the bushing mount will be on the engine side. If you put this on backwards or flip it, the mount will go on crooked and you'll see it twisted in, so you don't want that. Go ahead and reinstall the thin AC line, and then we'll install the bolt on the upper portion here. Now our AC line bracket is broken here. You can use a tie unit of some sort to hold that up and into place. Install the clip. Torque these upper bolts to 46 foot-pounds. Torque the 3 lower mount bolts to 46 foot-pounds. Torque these 2 bolts down to 51 foot-pounds. Install the vacuum hose. Slide that down into position. Get that clamp installed down below. Remove the rag. We're going to line up the post on here with the rubber grommet as we feed the port into the intake tube. Install the vacuum port on this side here. Get the 10mm bolt started over here. And then we can go ahead and snug that down. Let's snug down the clamp on the back. Go ahead and install the ground terminal on your battery. We'll snug that down. Once that's snug, you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.